I'm Kelly Corzan, lead edit instructor for thevj.com, and today we're going to take a look at some Final Cut Pro X special effects. There's some really cool ones, and the reason I picked this particular set of effects is because they can be done all within the Final Cut Pro application, so no third-party plugins are required. And you can create these same effects in any professional editing program, not just Final Cut Pro X. The buttons will be in different places, but you can also do them in Premiere Pro and Avid, any professional system that allows compositing and masking and Luma keying, really, which is what these effects involve. The other thing to mention is that when you're working with special effects, the conditions have to be very specific. The shots have to be specific, and in some instances you have to shoot them a special way. So we don't normally talk about shooting in an editing lesson, but because these do have those requirements, we're going to talk a little bit about how to shoot them as well. So let's get started. This first one we're going to take a look at, it's a freeze frame sequence, so looks pretty cool. This requires a very specific kind of shot. So what it requires is that the subject in the foreground be darker than the background, almost silhouette. So the first thing to do is move your playhead to the point where you want that first freeze frame to happen. So I think I'm going to do a series of three, maybe 1, 2, 3, and then have him right off. But you can do as many as you want. You could do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I mean, you could do a whole bunch. I'm going to do 3. So this is, I think, the first one. And I'm going to park my playhead there with the clip selected, come up to the Edit menu, and choose Add Freeze Frame. Okay, and that's also Option F is the shortcut, and you can see that the freeze frame was added right there. And I'm just going to take it, lift it straight up and off that primary storyline so that it's lined up exactly at the edit point. And next I'm going to press the V key, so that's, we can't see that and we can see the clip underneath, to pick our next spot. So I'm going to go to the next spot, which there's about the center. If I'm doing 3, I'm going to do one kind of in the center. That's my next freeze frame. Come to the Edit menu, choose Add Freeze Frame or Option F, and you can see there's the freeze frame there. Freeze frames by default are 4 seconds long. You can see the duration there. And you can change the default length in your preferences. So with this second freeze frame, I'm just going to drag it up like the other one and make sure it lines up at that point. And I'm going to press the V as in Victor key, and I'm going to find the last spot. So about there, I think. Same thing, move my playhead there, go to Edit, choose Add Freeze Frame or Option F, lift it up, make sure it matches. So now I'm going to press V for each of those so we can see everything. And if I play it back, you're going to see it just sticks there. We're not seeing the freezes. And that's because, as you know, you can only see what's on the topmost track in Final Cut Pro X. So we're going to select each of those, come to our inspector window, come to compositing, and right under compositing, the blend mode pull-down menu is here. It's normal by default, and you can't see the pull-down menu, but when I'm going to press on it, darken is going to be an option, and now I've just changed it to darken from normal. And now, close the inspector, let's see what we've got. 1, 2, 3. That's it. All right, so the next one, this is cloning. It looks like something that would be harder than it is, but it's actually much easier than you would think. So this is what we're going to make. Okay, and then a second clone comes in, and then a third clone comes in. Let's talk about how to shoot this. So what you're going to need to do is, I have 3 distinct chairs here, and we've shot it for 3 clones. And the important part is that you make sure that no area of each clone overlaps. So if we had 3 sitting in the chairs and say 1 sitting up here on the ledge or here, and they overlapped each other, that wouldn't work. It has to be a distinct separation between them. The 3 chairs could be a couch where you have one clone sit in the middle and then the one on the left sit on an arm and the one on the right sit on the other arm. So that's another way to do it. But here we have 3 chairs, and you put your camera on a tripod and frame it up and make sure it's the way you like it, because you're not going to want to move it after you've set it up. That's very important. So the first shot, you're going to press record on your camera after you've lined it up, and then you're going to walk into frame after you've started it recording, and you're going to start speaking. And then when that's done, he's going to leave frame and walk in again. And this time, he's going to walk in and sit in that right chair. And you can see he's responding to what the clone in the middle chair is saying, which is very nice. And then we do a third shot with the camera, still on the tripod, coming in and sitting in the left chair. So those are our 3 shots. Now, we have the clone in the center chair talking with the other 2 listening. But you could have all 3 talking to each other. That just takes a little more organization in terms of timing out who says what when. So let's build this now. So I'm going to take the first shot and drag it down and just add it to my primary storyline. And then I'm going to take and build this next shot right before he comes in, mark it in and out, and drag that one down. I'm also going to stagger it a little bit because we want the first guy to start talking for a little bit. And then I'm going to grab our third clip here, stagger it, so that the third clone comes in. So what we have now is this. Okay, and straight cut to that. And then the third comes in, cut to that. Now, we can't see all 3 yet, of course, because as we know, you can only see what's on the topmost track in Final Cut. So what we have to do is crop these 2 shots so that the other 2 can be seen. It's actually very easy. So I'm going to select the shot with the clone on the right, go into the inspector, scroll down, and now I am going to actually, I'll click on the transform tool. This is helpful because it puts this box around your viewer and you can kind of see where the edge is. So I'm going to crop the left side in, and you can see this line coming over to give you an idea. And I've got to go past the other 2 chairs because we want to reveal them. So there I can see the center clone. But now I've gone as far to the right as I can go, and it says 1080. Is as high as it can go. That's not really true. You can click on that number and type in a higher number. I'm going to type in a 1350, something like that, and then press return. And now that's pushed it over far enough, which is right there. So now I'm going to come to the top track and do the same thing. So I'm going to crop it from this side over to reveal these 2. So with it selected, I'm going to drag the right edge over as we start to see the clips beneath. And again, this one isn't far enough, so I have to type in a value, 1350, and now our line is separated. So I'm going to turn off the transform tool, and now we can see all 3 at the same time. So he comes in. Now there's a slight light change in the background when they each come in. And this is because when you're shooting, and if you're using natural daylight, the sun's slowly setting. So depending on how long it takes you to shoot each clone, the light's going to change a little bit. This one isn't too dramatic. You can still watch it again. There, it's just like a little flicker where it gets darker up in this area. So if we watch that. And then up here it's also gets a little darker just because it's gotten later in the day. This one isn't too extreme, so we can just do some video fade-ins. And I'm going to do a short one of 10 frames to fade the video in, and then that won't look as noticeable. So let's watch that. Now, if the difference is very great, if you took a long time in between, you'd need to come up and go into your color board and adjust the exposure for that so that it matches. But we could get away with just using video crossfades, so that's good. All right, so that's the cloning effect. Now, let's take a look at this is a very cool effect called sky replacement, and let's take a look at what the final thing looks like, and boom, so we've got a day sky and up, and it reveals a night sky. That's kind of a fun effect. So again, let's look at the ingredients for this specific effect. For your foreground image, you want the hills and the ground to be a distinct contrast between the sky. This includes not having any white on the hills. So if there was snow on the hills, that would be a problem because there's white in the sky. And we're going to separate, we're going to create a mask that masks out the ground and separates it from the sky. So we don't want any of the same colors in here as we have back here. So that's kind of a little recipe technique. So you're going to want to find a shot or shoot something that looks like that. Now, because this happens to be a letterboxed shot, I'm going to go in and first let me add it to my timeline so that I can do this. I'm going to go in and scale it out a little bit so there isn't black at the top and bottom. Okay. Now I want to copy that, so I'm going to click on it, Command-C for copy, move my playhead back to the beginning, Command-V for paste. Now I have two identical shots, both zoomed in, so there's no letterboxing, on top of each other. I'm going to click on the top shot to select it, go into the effects browser, and under masks, I want to drag the draw mask effect onto that top clip. Close the inspector. And when I put my cursor over the window, you can see it's now a pen tool with a plus sign. And at the bottom it says click to add a control point. So these control points that we're going to add will create a mask as we roll along. So I'm just going to start at the right side here and click to add these points. I'm slightly below where the hills meet the sky. I'm just going to do that all the way across. They don't have to be too close together. And they'll have to be more close together if you have a really jagged edge. But this one's pretty straight across. So I'm just going to keep adding these until I get all the way to the edge. Now, if I were to leave it like this, that isn't enough because we have to actually draw a mask around this entire area. But you know, we can't add anything over here because that's off screen. So we want to come up to our view menu. Right now it's at fit and 35% makes it fit. So I'm going to go a little bit below to 25%. And now I have this black area or non-screen area that I can work in for my control points. So I'm just going to continue out to the side here. And then I'm going to come down, straight down, and then I'm going to come straight over in the black and then straight up again. And then finally I'm going to close the loop by clicking on that last, or what was the first control point when we started. So now that whole area is now masked out. So we can come back and do fit again. Okay, so next we're going to come to this bottom clip now. Select it, open the video effects browser. We're going to come to the keying effect category, and we want to drag Luma Keyer down onto that first clip and close the inspector. All right, so I've got the Luma key on the first one. I've got my points on that one. So now I'm going to click on the Luma key layer, go back into the inspector, and now I can see the Luma Keyer effect in my effects parameters list. And before I do anything, I'm just going to take this handle and drag it all the way back. Now I'm going to come down to my timeline and move my playhead to the first point where I want the sky to start pulling away. I'm going to move it to about there. And I want to add one keyframe, and I just click on it there. See, it turns yellow. Now I'm going to come back and I'm going to move the playhead to where I want the effect to finish. And once you've added your first keyframe, any subsequent changes you make automatically add a second keyframe. So I don't have to actually add a keyframe. As soon as I make an adjustment, one will be added. The first adjustment I'm going to do is take this white handle at the far right and drag it to the left until I start to see the sky disappear. And you can kind of fiddle with the blacks a little bit. And just kind of keep dragging them over using all 4 points here until you see complete black. Luma roll-off, that can be at about 60. Not over that. But if you don't get absolute black, you can come down to your matte tools and you can use your fill holes or your edge distance. You can also use these levels here, your blacks, mids, and your whites to get that completely black. So once you've got that black and you have your keyframes, you're all set. So let's close that. And now we want to come to our background shot. This is a still image, but it could be video. And now I'm just going to drag this beneath our other 2 clips on our timeline. All right, so that's the sky that we're going to reveal to. Let's take a look. Yep, and there it is. So it just peels right off. Pretty cool. Our 4th one is called color replacement. So if for whatever reason I want to change just the color of this man's jumper, his pullover, from red to blue, I can isolate that color and change it. I'm going to select the clip and then click on my inspector to open it. Final Cut in its latest version now has an extra button up here that is the color inspector. You used to have to go into here and go to color and drag the color board on, or you could do the shortcut Command 6 to get into the color board, but now there's this entire new color inspector. So there's the color board, which we all know, which dealt with color, saturation, and exposure, but there's a few other things that have been added. Color wheels, color curves, and if you check out our Final Cut Pro advanced lessons, you can learn how to use those. We're coming down to hue, saturation. Curves is the one we want. And there's a lot of these, hue versus saturation, hue versus luma, luma versus saturation. So we're going to do hue versus hue. I'm going to click on this eyedropper here. And when I put it over my viewer, it's turning into a dropper. And I'm going to click on his pullover. Now as soon as I click, 3 points of color were added, because I guess that color that we're looking at is a combination of a little bit of orange, a little bit of fuchsia, and a little bit of red. But now that those have been selected, I can just take this red point, and you'll see this gray line behind it, and simply drag it straight up to change it to blue. Now, I can also drag it to the left or the right to kind of change the type of blue that it is. So now he's got a different colored pullover on, which is pretty great, and you can see even playing it, it's completely changed. Now, the only issue, and it's not happening on this one, is if you should find yourself with some of the color, let's go in a little closer, with some of the color bleeding, say, onto his lips or his ears, or bleeding into the rocks if there's blue back here. There's a way to isolate just his pullover so that the color doesn't bleed onto anything else. So what we have to do that, let's come back here to our video parameters, and we're going to come to our hue saturation that we just did, and we're going to click here and add a shape mask. I'm going to close this so we have a little more real estate. And I'm going to come back out so it fits. So as I move this around, you can see that adding a shape mask lets me determine where that color will be. So when I move the shape mask off, there's no blue there. And this outer circle is the fall off. So you'll see there's a fade between the outer circle and the inner circle. And I don't want there to be any fall off, so I'm just going to drag that in. And using these green handles, you can drag your mask outward. You might have to rotate it a little bit. You just kind of have to work with the points. This white point will actually change it to a rectangle instead of a circle. So you can kind of just sort of keep tweaking it till you get just the blue right. You can move it from the center handle there. We want his whole thing to be, but maybe we just want to avoid his lips. Just takes a little fiddling. And that's pretty good. So If I come back and play it, no blue is being picked up anywhere else. Okay, so that's how you do color replacement. Now we're going to do color isolation, which, if you saw the movie Pleasantville, is where everything is black and white except one object that you can pick out of the scene to make color. It's very cool. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so I've got my shot here in my timeline, and much like the other effects, this shot needs to have a specific set of characteristics, and that is that the object, which we want to keep in color, which is the flower here in the foreground, has to be quite a bit different in color than the background, and it has to have some fairly sharp edges that will help us out. So the first step, go into the effects browser, under the color effects, click and drag the color board effect and drop it onto the clip in the timeline. Let's close the effects browser and open the inspector. And there's our color board effect there in our list. If I hover my mouse over here, over the shape icon, and click on it, Add Color Mask is an option. You can't see it in the screenshot, but it's there. So I choose Add Color Mask. And if you look in my viewer, my cursor is changed from an arrow to an eyedropper. So what I want to do now is sort of sample across the range of colors that the rose has. So I'm going to click and drag downward without catching any of the background. And that's pretty good there. So when I let go, the color comes back, but we're going to take care of that in a second. So the next step is to come to our color board, click here, and here along the bottom to the right of where it says mask, you can see there's inside and outside. Inside would be our flower, and outside is everything else. So since I want to make the outside black and white, I'm going to click on that. Then I'm going to make sure I'm clicked in the saturation tab. I'm going to take the global saturation and drag it all the way down. Now there's no color in the background. It's completely desaturated. So I'm going to click on the inside mask, and I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to crank the global saturation all the way up. All right, let's take a look and see how that works. Yeah, looks pretty good. But I'd like to do something a little fancier. I'd like to actually have the flower start in black and white along with the background, and as it blooms, I want it to come into full color. So I'm going to move my playhead to the point in my clip where I want it to be full color, go into the inspector, and then to the right of color board, I've got my add keyframe here, and I'm just going to click on it. And that makes it yellow, which means I've added a keyframe there. So I've just defined the end point of where I want this rose to be at full color. Now I'm going to move my playhead back to the first frame of my clip. And I don't have to add another keyframe, because after you've added one keyframe, subsequent keyframes will automatically be added. So I'm just going to make sure I'm on the saturation tab, and now I'm going to drag the saturation all the way down. So now the rose and the background are black and white. Let's play that back and see how it looks. So it's gradually fading in, and at peak color, and there it is.
For more editing tutorials and to learn how to do these special effects in other softwares like Premiere Pro, sign up for a free trial at thevj.com. And if you're enjoying these tutorials, subscribe to our YouTube channel here.